Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our series of ongoing conversations with men who I consider are inspired and bold leaders, teachers, and in this case, God, I don't know where to start with you, Warren Farrell. You have been a leader, a teacher, pretty much a coach, a voice in the wilderness. Often, you wrote the book, The Myth of Male Power, which was really prescient in many ways because so many men say, oh, I hear about all this male privilege, but I fucking don't have any privilege myself. So there's always that disjunction between the large culture and ourselves. And of course, your new book is The Boy Crisis, which is just, I want to say hitting bookstores, but I guess it's hitting Amazon. I'm sure there's a bookstore somewhere it's hitting. But it's hitting this week.
Yes, actually, Barnes and Noble is putting it up front in 70 of their stores, so I'm very pleased about that.
Okay, well, let's jump right in. It's called The Boy Crisis. We hear so much today about, hashtag Me Too. We hear very much, and for good reason, we hear a lot about the crises that women face in culture, and there's almost no conversation except you. You really are the voice of, hey, folks, part of the reason we're having trouble in our culture with these guys is because guys are not being raised in a way that really brings out their best heroic self. So you have so much to say. We could talk for 20 hours. It's a very thick book it's a very disturbing read in some ways. You really get how many ways that boys and men are cheated of happiness. Mm-hmm. So I'll just throw it at you to start. What's your premise of The Boy Crisis?
Well, where I started realizing that I needed to do something with boys, and all my past has been adult males and adult females for the most part, was when I started seeing that in 63 of the largest developed nations, our sons are falling significantly behind our daughters in all academic subjects. But they're especially falling behind our daughters in the two areas that are the greatest predictors of success, reading and writing. So I began to look a little bit more deeply about that and realize, well, what is there about developed nations? And realize that the developed nations have in common that they allow for much more divorce because they don't have to be so dependent upon survival. And whenever there's divorce, there's a division. Some of the children are raised by about an equal amount of father, and some of the children are raised by minimal or no father involvement. And as I dug deeply into that, I saw that there was among the boys that had little or no father involvement, those were the boys that were having problems in, would you believe, more than 70 different areas, having problems with assertiveness versus aggressiveness, having problems with lack of social skills, lack of empathy, psychological depression, much more likely to be suicidal, much more likely to be into drugs and opioids, much more likely to be doing worse in every subject, not just involved in video games, but in video game addiction. When they got to be the right age or below the right age, getting addicted to video porn. And the list went on and on. Then I started looking into the scientific literature and realized that boys who did not have significant father involvement by the age of 9 already had telomeres that were 19% shorter. Telomeres are the parts of they're in every single cell. The shorter the telomere, the shorter your life expectancy. The longer your telomere, the more the telomere does its function of reproducing genes that allows you to have a longer life expectancy. Boys by the age of 9 had telomeres that were 19% shorter. Girls and boys on average had telomeres that were 14% shorter. But as you can see, while the girls did much worse without father involvement, the boys did 40% worse than the girls did. And so I was finding, scientific data like this that really helped me understand that there were 10, although there were 10 causes of the boy crisis, that the most important single cause is fatherlessness.
Right. How does fatherlessness affect the length of telomeres in DNA?
First of all, no one knows the exact answer to that question, but we do know that it does. That's the bottom line. But some of the ways that I would expect that it does is this. When a father is not involved, when a mother and father are both raising children, there's a tension between them, what I call a checks and balances between the mother's parenting that tends to be very nurturing, protective. The child knows that is loved unconditionally. With the father, the child is almost always loved unconditionally as well. But the father does not love without putting approval and goals with the child. So the child. So with mother and father, for example, the mother and father will set the exact same boundaries, and the boundaries will be. You can't have your ice cream until you finish your peas, let's say, and so with the mother, the child tests the boundaries with both parents exactly the same way. But then with the mother will say, well, gee, we've both been under a lot of stress. I'm not going to have a big argument about a few peas and whether they're done. And so I'll tell you what, if you have a couple more peas, then I'll give you the ice cream. And so the child registers, with mom, I can manipulate a better deal. And this is very good for manipulative skills. But with the father, even if he doesn't say it verbally, he sort of looks at the child in a way that says, you know the deal, and I know the deal, and you know that I know the deal. You can either finish your peas and have your ice cream, or not finish your peas and not have your ice cream. Then the child goes, "You're so mean," and mom doesn't do that. And the father says, "You can continue to whine, but you'll be tomorrow night. There'll be no ice cream either." And then the child begins to notice that with father, there's no way around finishing doing what you need to do. Mm-hmm. So with the father, the child learns attention focus. With the mother, the child is more likely to learn attention deficit and have an attention deficit disorder. So children raised primarily by dads are 15% likely to have attention deficit disorder. By moms, 30% likely to have attention deficit disorder. And so here's the important aspect of this, though. The child then takes what has happened when the child can't focus on the peas to get the ice cream is the child does not learn postponed gratification.
Yeah.
Postponed gratification is the single most important quality that it takes to be able to succeed. So you can tell your child all the dreams that you want, but the bigger the dreams, you say, sweetie, you can be anything you want to be. But if you don't teach the child postponed gratification, they can't finish even their homework, and they learn that the bigger their dreams, the bigger their disappointments. And so they become failures in school. And here's where the really important stuff starts. They become failures in school. They become angry that they're not respected. They're often very sweet boys that are very highly protected. And from that sweetness comes, but they feel that their sweetness is not being valued by their peers, not being valued by their teachers when they don't finish homework. And they start becoming angry and they start withdrawing. So they withdraw into video games, not just in a proper way, but in an addictive way. They withdraw into video porn in an addictive way. And as they get increasingly rejected by women and by peers, they start finding that they build a deep-seated anger, depression, rudderlessness, sense of purpose. And in the worst case scenarios, that anger becomes something that they take out on their schoolmates and their teachers, and then you see the school shootings. So that's the sequence that oftentimes happens from boys and girls without fathers. It happens to both sexes to some degree. Girls don't do nearly as well. Girls have manifested differently. Girls are far more likely to be either fearful of having sex with boys, even when there's a good relationship, or they fear that they don't know boys well enough, so the only thing that they know that the boys want that they have is to be sexual, and they're sexual before they're ready to be. And so that's it.
So lack of dads is clearly a problem, and it's not just lack of presence of dad; it's lack of present dads, right? I mean, this is an old issue going back.
Yes and no. So the child, even if the father is not so first of all, yes, being present as a father, understanding that what we now have hard data to prove is that the amount of time a father spends with his children is far more important than the amount of money the father brings in. once the income gets between 50 and 80,000, depending on where you live in the United States, almost everything, all the children's benefits after that comes from time, not dime.
Got that. No, that's true. There's so much in the book around this. So that's a primary problem, boys growing up without dads.
Yes. Yes.
You just mentioned the word purpose, and you talk about the purpose void in the book.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of this series of conversations with teachers like yourself is to really explore, what does it mean to be an inspired man? What does it mean to live from an inspired place? And as you talk about in the book, for most of human history till roughly the 60s, your purpose was basically shoved down your throat. Whatever your father did, you did. Or you went off to war and you just did what a man had to do. And it was very simple. Life has gotten much more complicated since then. And you pointed out, you used a great expression in your book. You said, when boys look around now, who are the cultural heroes, right? The Elon Musk and the Steve Jobs, the Mark Zuckerbergs. And these are guys who all dropped out of the system, right?
Yes.
As you said, I think you said they built their own ladder.
Yes.
So I was thinking about that. And for me, I grew up in a fairly secure home with a very present dad who coached baseball and did all the good things, right? For me, I'm building my own ladder, living my own inspired life was my entire life, from high school, from junior high. I'm going to create the life I want because I came from, I guess, that kind of security. And I've always seen that as the great opportunity of our age. But reading your book, I begin to see that, there's almost a paradox of choice with purpose. If you don't grow up with a given sense of purpose, it's not always this peachy thing that you get to create your own life. There's a void that lives in people. What can men do in their various, from their various backgrounds to fill that purpose void? Because it's called on us to fill it ourselves right now, to build our own ladder. So what would you say to guys who feel like, I don't know what my purpose is? My dad didn't give it to me. My culture didn't give it to me. I don't really like what the culture is giving to me.
Yes. First of all, the largest thing is that we hear a great deal, especially among feminists, that it's that we have male privilege. Check your privilege at the door. And we hear that we live in a world that's dominated by a patriarchy in which men made the rules to benefit men at the expense of women. But this is not the way. And so when our sons go to college, especially, and even in high school, they begin to feel as if they're a male, that they have this privilege, and that they're the future presidents and CEOs, and therefore they carry around this sort of like, if you're a male, shut your mouth, just listen. Type of thing, which it brings a great deal of shame to them. Then they learn that that sex is dirty, and they have these tremendous mixed messages around sex. And then they learn that, but you're the one. Girls have the option to initiate sex. You have the expectation to initiate sex. You're the ones that is supposed to be more likely than she is to pay for a really nice dinner, to pay for drinks at a bar, and so on. And so they begin to realize that they have to compensate for their inferiority to girls by paying to bridge the gap between the inferiority they have and the superiority that the girls have when the girl is attractive and young and he wants her more than she wants him, at least on a sexual level. And therefore any type of interest in sex he has to pay for rather than be equal to. And so all this is happening in his unconscious mind. Now, what he never looks at, because he's never taught to look at it, is the bigger picture. This world of male privilege, in fact, throughout all of history, even among animals and insects, the male role was to prepare to be disposable in war, and disposable potentially in the workplace. The people who built our railroads were disposable Chinese males, for the most part. The people who were in our coal mines, in our oil rigs, on our construction sites, they die at one per workday hour on our construction sites. You pick up, you build, look around your home, see the wood that goes into the home. That was constructed by loggers, who then put it onto trucks, and the truckers. These are the most hazardous jobs. So 92% of the people who die in the workplace are males who are sacrificing their lives in the hope that they will be able to bring their children money and their wives a nice home and a nice community so that their children can have lives that are better than their lives. That is their hope. And yet, instead of saying, thank you, Dad and Grandpa, for creating lives where we have the option to make choices that you never had the option to make. And we are going to college and doing things that you never dreamed of doing because you gave up your dreams, or you learned very early that you shouldn't even have dreams. My father told me until I wrote my third book, he said, Warren, you can't make a living writing books. If you want to support a family and be useful and valued as a man, you've got to not do what you want to do. You've got to do what you have to do. You have to be, in essence, a human doing and not a human being. But what we never imagined, or what my father never imagined, is that instead of receiving respect for the money he earned, and my father managed a company in Europe, and then that company, my mother became depressed, and so my father wanted to support her and gave up the job managing the company. But at his age, when he returned, he had to walk down the street selling floor brushes, even though he came from managing a company in a European nation. And so he didn't do what he wanted to do. He did what he knew would allow us to go to college and be able to do things like have this type of podcast with you.
Mm-hmm. Like you have an amazing phrase in your book that men are trained that even when, let's see, how'd you put it? Even when you win, you lose. So when you win by succeeding in business, sacrificing your time, your dreams to get that job, to go to war, to play on the football field. You have many references to that. It's really interesting. You win, but at the same time you lose.
Yes.
And we're trained that's I think you call it, is that what you call hero intelligence, heroic intelligence?
One of the parts of the book is what I call the gap between heroic intelligence and health intelligence. So heroic intelligence is basically socialization for a short life. Being willing to die in war usually leads to a short life. And being willing to work at hazardous jobs, it leads to a shorter life. And being willing to do what the Japanese call karoshi, which is become an executive, but to die at the word karoshi means die at the desk or die from overwork. And so many Japanese see their parents doing that the Japanese developed a game, and the game is called karoshi. And the person who wins the game wins by offing himself. And so because
you can't make this stuff up.
The bright young kids, they get it. That this is, and they're saying, we often see our children being purposeless. And one of the reasons that they're purposeless, particularly if they don't have father involvement, is because they feel like, gee, do I really want to be selling product X to support 4 children, and I don't even believe in product X, but I feel I need to do it, and I have to go all around the country and miss my children's recitals and growing up and every day of it when they first walk and first talk. I don't want to do this. And so they don't know what to, if they don't have fathers, the father doesn't know how to do this, which is the crucial role of the father, which is to help the child know that she or he has unique characteristics. And it is incumbent upon the child to do 2 things, not one thing. One is to discover his or her unique characteristics and become what I call a human being. But the other is to find out to recall that you need to produce income to be able to contribute to your family's ability to survive. And so you have to balance being a human being with being a human doing. And when you balance both of those well, it is complex. You have to assess trade-offs. You have to have discussions with your family. So I create ways that families can create family dinner nights without the family dinner nights morphing into family dinner nightmares. And so all of these things are a very tough set of things to do. The mother is wonderful at leaving the children feeling secure in these areas. And many mothers, especially single mothers, have broken their backs to raise children, even oftentimes as they're working and raising income as well. But the challenge is that children need both that security of the nurturance that mothers are more likely to give unconditionally, and they also need to be pushed beyond their boundaries, out of their comfort zones, told to try things again. They need to be teased. They need to be roughhoused with. They need to be and so all of these things, and they need to have, especially as I said before, postponed gratification. And it's when the balance between the mother and father, the mother saying to the father, "You're being too mean. You're pushing the child too hard," and the father saying, "No, you're enabling the child. You're not giving the child credit. Yes, I use a more complex word that the child doesn't understand." That's the way we learn language, by saying words that the child doesn't understand and having the child leap into that knowledge that was not understood prior to it being articulated.
Yeah, that's great description. I was just laughing. I just had a memory. Part of what I'm trying to do with this series of conversations is to show that there are many ways of being a good and or noble man today. Since there's no cultural, orthodoxy. There are lots of ways of being a good man, and you used a couple of terms. You mentioned roughhousing. So I have two sons. One was born a warrior, absolutely born a warrior, collected weapons. He's a drummer now. And the other was born a scholar. He's the jazz pianist, and he very gentle boy. And the other one and I, we would have 1-minute wrestling rounds on the big king bed, and the little one would jump up and down in the corner and wait for his opening, and then cannonball on top of us. And it was great, right? Because he wasn't going to wrestle because he wasn't a warrior by nature, but we found a way to sort of be inclusive and enjoy each other for who we are without forcing a kind of masculinity on, the same kind of masculinity on two very different people. Now,
that is really fascinating. And what you said is so true in nature too.
Yeah.
85% of the reproduction in nature comes from the female choosing to mate with the alpha male. And so like among certain beetles, for example, the female goes down into a hole where it gets ready to be receptive to a male having sex with her. So a male beetle that has developed the longest armament is the one that protects that hole from being invaded by other beetles. And so the male beetle has to fend off all the other male beetles that are competing to be down there. The male beetle that survives usually gets to be down there. However, about 10 or 15% of beetles see that there's no way, shape, or form that they're going to win the female by battling off all these other males. So the other beetles that succeed in the other 15% figure out a way of digging a different hole down that does not compete with the and accessing the female through their own cleverness. And so one of your sons was the warrior, and the other son was the one that figured out a different way of getting to the beetle by digging a different hole, if you will.
Yeah, his different hole is
that fascinating?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, because it's very interesting. They say therapists who have, one kid believe in nurture, and therapists who have two kids believe in nature, because kids come out really different.
Yes.
And which leads us to what I really want to talk about, which is that a lot of the men watching this are very different, right?
Yes.
Everybody comes with their own sense of what actually turns them on, what excites them about their life. And you talk in your book so movingly about this hero paradox. I never really thought about it. I'm a huge student of Joseph Campbell, done all that kind of work, and I've never thought about the cost of it. It's always been, this is what we do. We go out, we fight, we learn new skills, we face our dragon, we experience a death and rebirth, and we come home heroic, and we turn the land green again. Perfect. Yes. I got that. That's the cycle of life. But you bring up that the hero paradox, you call it, it's valuing yourself by not valuing yourself. And that's a painful thought. It's preparation, as you said, to die for the tribe. And that there is something there. Now, we're not on the front lines of parapets yet in our culture. There's no current war coming our way. So there's not a natural place for men to go. Speaking to the men here, of many different kind of men, we've heard also from Dr. Glover. You know Dr. Robert Glover.
Oh yes, I've done TV shows with him.
You guys are bookends, man. I want you to teach. And he talks about the nice guy syndrome as a way of sacrificing what you really want in the world, not for a high purpose, but because you're not comfortable with masculinity.
Yes.
You're talking about putting yourself second or third in the world because that's kind of an acculturation. Mm-hmm. So we're in a time now where we have the luxury, and I think it is a luxury, that we get to pick our inspired life. We get to build our ladder, as you say. We get to choose the life we want. How does a guy listening to you dissociate himself from the cultural norms of you have to not value yourself? How does someone value himself, find his inspired life without being overwhelmed by cultural norms?
Very good. Yeah. The key word there, or the key words there, are understanding the concept of social bribes. So if I am a little bit inclined toward playing football, I learned that the cheerleaders will be cheering for me, and if I'm really a hero, if I'm a great quarterback or a great end, I do something like when I was being asked to play football in high school, I was my skill set was kicking, and so my dream was that I would kick the points that would win the touchdown at the very end, the field goal, and so maybe I'll share this story that one of the people I worked with told me. He said, I really wanted my dad's approval. I didn't even know that consciously, but I knew that indirectly as I look back on it, because the first time my father came to one of my football games and I was a right end, I was so nervous that I would drop the pass, that I dropped the pass. And I did that twice in a row. Fortunately, the quarterback was a good friend and he gave me a third try. And the third time, I not only caught the pass, but I evaded a couple of tacklers and I scored a touchdown, and it was a crucial touchdown. And my father went berserk in the stands. He was like, that's my son, that's my son. He just caught the one that caught the touchdown, that's my son. And I didn't know until some years later, I played in college football as well, the guy said. But I messed up my back in my first or second year. And my brother, about 5 years, 10 years after that, he and I were having a heart-to-heart talk, one of our first ones. And he said, John, when you messed up your back like that, I have to say that for a few minutes, I was actually happy that maybe now I would get some attention. Maybe now Dad would love me as much as you. He said, when my dad stood in the stands and said, that's my son, and almost ignored me, it always made me feel like the black and white TV when you were the color TV. And it was really so deeply sad for me. And so what both of those sons were impacted by was the social bribe that said, boy, male, if you risk your life, you will be more loved. More loved by who? Your father? Your mother? Now, this is not really true, but this is what the boys believed. The father, the mother, the cheerleaders, who are they cheering for? The boys in the stands? No.
Like the band? No.
Who are risking their lives, who are risking concussions, spinal cord injuries, messed up backs. And they're basically saying, 1st and 10, do it again. Risk another concussion, another messed up back. They might as well be saying 1st and 10 concussion again. But this is the boy, this young man I'm talking about, who was learning to value himself by not valuing himself, by not valuing the fact that an intact brain was more valuable than a brain that was suffering from multiple concussions. And of course, in war, all our war heroes, every statue comes from a man who, again, risked his life, as Winston Churchill did, as all of our, every statue is a man who was willing to be disposable in order to have himself made immortal. And so we learn to value ourselves by not valuing ourselves. We learn that heroic intelligence was socialization for a short life, whereas what we also learned was when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Now, when the going gets tough, the tough get going is socialization again for a short life, because all your adrenaline goes up and your epinephrine is at risk, and so you are likely to have more blood clots and die sooner if you are just forcing yourself to not be in touch with your feelings. What socialization for a long life or health intelligence is about is when the going gets tough, tune into yourself. don't necessarily get going and don't necessarily stop. It is, but discover your edge. As people who are good yoga instructors like Iyengar have taught, that that it's your edge which you have to watch out for. You want to push yourself out of your comfort zone. That's a positive. But you want to know exactly how far out of your comfort zone you should go. You want to be able to not have fear all the time, but you also don't want to be fearless. And so these are the balances. So what does a good father do? And what do good parents do? Fathers and parents have family dinner nights where there are no electronics, where there's discussions about anything. You can say anything. You listen before you speak. You speak in turn. These are the structures that I create for family dinner nights that I have found are successful, that help children then determine how much toughing it out should I do? How much toughing it out is in my nature? Maybe I want to tough it out, and that really gives me a sense of purpose. If that's what thrills you and you are discerning that it's not thrilling you because somebody's approving of you, then maybe you're a natural warrior who is willing to and thoughtful about, maybe you do want to give your life as a firefighter. But before you put on the volunteer firefighter uniform and look like a firefighter who gets respect and no pay, ask yourself the question, for what am I doing this?
Yeah.
And have people in your community respond and say, well, he turned out to be a fine young man after all, then I ask you to question that.
It's interesting. Two things come to mind. There are no cheerleaders at Math League, right? There's no social bribe. There's no social bribes for the National Merit semifinalists. Is one thing. So there's no social bribes. So it puts it on us as individuals to look more deeply, to tune in more deeply to what makes me happy that doesn't get the social approval. And the other thing that came to mind, I lost it.
You just said you lost it to make me feel better about myself when I lose.
Yeah, it keeps coming. I was writing it down. I wrote the first one. I didn't write the second one. Well, I was reminded by a conversation I had in college with a guy. I think he came from a military family. We were touring some fort, and he said, it's a great thing to die for your country. And I said, I'd rather live for my country. Like, it didn't strike me that was a good idea. I mean, if you had to, you had to. I expected growing. My grandfather was in the cavalry in World War I. My father was infantry in World War II. I totally expected growing up I would be in World War III. I just thought that was the generational thing. It's what guys did. But it didn't mean I wanted to do it, right? And so for me, and again, it could be because I came from a fairly secure background, my life has always been about self-actualization. And you make an amazing insight. By the way, it was my favorite page of the book. I almost ran out of highlighter. You make this distinction between Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The traditional hierarchy of needs. First, you have to have your physical comfort. Then you kind of have your social needs. And finally, at the end, at the top, once you have all these, for people who don't know it, once you have your various layers of security, comfort, then you get to have self-actualization. You get to grow as a human being, grow your consciousness, which is a wonderful thing. What you pointed out is that the traditional male pyramid is not about self-actualization at all. It's actually built for self-sacrifice.
Yes.
And then today, what we're talking about in this whole series is really about self-actualization. I realized that reading through your book, that what we're looking for are ways for men to self-actualize, to become their unique self, who they actually are. So for guys, again, I'll ask this again, maybe in another way, for guys who didn't have the right kind of dad, who didn't have the social bribes that got them living what our friend Mark calls their unique selves, right? But living a social self that's not really them. What guidance would you give to a man who maybe has been living out this self-sacrifice? If I show up at work, I'm noble, even if I hate work.
Yes.
What guidance would you give towards self-actualization?
Yes, I'd say if you're a parent listening to this, and let me pick up on answering your question by segueing it into the story about the father and him cheering for his son that was playing football. So what should we cheer for? Should we cheer for anything? Absolutely. So the same father, when the same son, when he grew up, he tried to teach his sons to become kind. So how did he reward that? He rewarded it by first teaching enough of it so that the boy, his son, eventually one day he saw the boy play ping pong with a friend from the neighborhood, and the friend, and it was like 21-19 or 21-20, and so it was just about, and the other boy hit a shot that probably hit that probably missed the table, but his son said that it hit the end of the table, therefore giving the other boy the winning point, even though probably it didn't actually do that. So what that father did is when they did the prayer he was over for Thanksgiving. When they did the prayer for Thanksgiving dinner, he said, I thank you, Lord, for having a son who is able to be so kind as to give up the winning point with the possibility that his friend, got the point when perhaps he didn't. This is truly the type of kindness and thoughtfulness that I care about. Now, everybody at that table then started having a different social bribe, if you would, the social bribe of kindness being rewarded. Mm-hmm. And that's a positive social bribe as long as it doesn't go too far. You don't want somebody who's always giving up. I used to play a lot of tennis, and I would oftentimes do exactly that with tennis games. If it wasn't a tournament, and it was very close, and the other person I felt more need to win than I did, I would purposely throw the last point or two and let the other person win. However, when it got to a tournament, I lost my kindness. I just focused on winning. And so it was, but that was my own little translation of that in my life. But these things don't happen in isolation. People are naturally selfish. We don't learn to be altruistic when we're born. When we're born, we say, me, cry, more food, more attention, more this. When our sister gets more attention, or brother gets more attention than we do, we fight to get that attention back. And so, but we, around family dinner nights and around re-examining type of messages we're sending to our children, when the message is being valued because of your kindness, your thoughtfulness, your ability to love, but yet at the same time having the postponed gratification that allows you to succeed and be kind, not out of a need to get attention from being kind, but being kind in addition to being able to accomplish yourself.
Very interesting. But so I guess the first rule is be aware of the social bribes going on around you.
Yes.
What are you getting from your mother? What are you getting? By the way, I just had a memory. This is really, you're jogging a lot of memories. When my warrior son, and he really was a warrior. When he was 3 years old on his birthday, he would wear his weapons at night, which he collected from his friend. His hippie mother never bought him weapons, but he collected them, and he used to go to sleep in his Crusader armor. We took the cross off. And he had a visor. And on his third birthday, I bought him cowboy boots. So he was in hog heaven. And he went to sleep at night in his full armor and his cowboy boots. And I leaned over on his third birthday and I said, Amit, why are you going to sleep with all your weapons, your gistles, distils, and pistols, which he called them, and your sword? And he had a sword in one hand and a gun in the other, right? And he looked at me through the visor and he goes, you never know. You never know. Like, he was a warrior. Wow. I got chills in my arm. I'm like, this kid came from another planet. Okay. So he, so I used to teach him. So the point of the story is I used to teach him because of who he was. I said, because he was such a powerful kid. I said, when I picked him up at school, at elementary school, I'd say, tell me an act of kindness you saw today. And I would get him just getting aware of that, because he was really a rough and tumble kid. We did that too. Yeah. So he got both from me. So I guess what you're saying is that guys should pay attention to what you call social bribes they get, the approval we get from our fathers, our mothers, our girlfriends, our friends, and start assessing, are these really meaningful to me?
Yes, exactly.
That's the first step.
And the best way to assess that is through the family discussion. And, and the father saying, well, let's look at this. How did you feel after you gave up the game to your friend and he won? And how did you feel when we talked about it? How did you, and the father says, here's the way I felt when I was a kid, and there's some parallel to that. The mother shares her perspective. The daughter shares her perspective. And so there's no right answers or wrong answers, but as the children start hearing each different person's perspective, they learn a few things. One is, what are the trade-offs of every way of looking at things? More about what rings true for me.
Yeah.
And then third, that everybody has a different story. And one of the most important things to do is to take movies. I have a whole list of movies to watch. And then to analyze the movies and to recognize that every family member was just watched the same movie. But if there are 5 family members, there will be 5 significantly different interpretations of that movie. And not from, oh, great acting or bad acting, or I enjoyed the movie or I didn't enjoy the movie, but dig deep into it. And as you dig deep into it, what were the messages about men, about women, about money, about power, about kindness, about, about relationships, about emotional intelligence. And as you dig into and you dig deep, you will have your children becoming much more emotionally secure. And these are some of the pathways, not to heroic intelligence, but to health intelligence. Having said that, there are going to be boys and girls who will naturally feel that they want to be the firefighters, the police officers, and the construction workers, and so on. And thank goodness we need those desperately. We need first responders. We need people who will make sacrifice.
What rough men do at night.
Your children, you want your children to make the sacrifices that speak to who they are as human beings, not to just getting approval from you.
Beautiful, beautiful. I forget the quote, but we sleep at night because of what rough men do by night. I forget the quote.
Yes, we often say that women civilize men. Well, there's truth to that, but also the opposite is an enormous amount of truth. By fighting in the wars and doing the dirty work and going into the coal mines, we civilize women by not having to go to war, not having to do the dirty work, and then be able to come back and say, oh, sweetie, why don't you be more considerate? Why don't you be more this way or that way? So it sounds like they're civilizing us, but they're civilizing us because of the privilege that comes from not having to be the ones going to war. And even to this day in the United States, as we both know, Adam, it is our sons who, when we have this belief that and this 14th Amendment that says equal protection of the laws. And yet it's only our sons that have to register for male-only draft registration when they're 18. And if they don't, they can't ever get a federal job. If they don't, they can't in most states get a license, a driver's license. If they don't, they have to pay a $250,000 fine. And they're on a list that is being looked at very carefully by the government. And so but we don't do this for our daughters. What do we ask our daughters to do in order to gain the right to vote?
Age?
Nothing.
Yeah, age.
Yeah, just age. Yes, exactly.
Right.
Just
Okay.
older. They don't have to earn the right to vote.
Interesting.
Like boys do. Boys cannot. They will be deprived of the right to vote if they don't register for the mail-only draft registration.
It's really interesting. I thought of the other thing that I wanted to say was that you mentioned there are no statues built to men who work hard and come home and are good fathers and who are good husbands and who do well at work and who haven't gone off and actually killed anybody or sacrificed in classic ways. But there are no statues to those good dads and those good fathers who live beautiful lives.
Yes.
That was a very good point. In many ways, your book is a necessary read, I think. I think for men and for women. You were just talking now about helping boys figure out their purpose. The purpose of these calls, these series, is to help men sort of refine their sense of purpose, this balance between the heroic intelligence where you are self-sacrificing, and there is a certain joy in self-sacrificing, but balance that also with self-actualization. I think that's kind of the balance that comes out of your book. Let's get real. Just like with Me Too, we have to be real about physical violence, emotional abuse, all that kind of stuff in the workplace. There's real stuff there. And I think you're one of the only voices out there that are saying, hey, world, let's look over here at boys, what's going on for them, because it's not so healthy there either.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so finding a balance between self-actualization and self-heroism is a great discussion, is a great is a great process. We'll be doing that in this whole Way of the Inspired Man, which is kind of this movement that we're creating, is helping guys find that path between the heroic and the self-actualized. Some people are lucky, like you said, they're born warriors. They're happy to go off to war. Mm-hmm. They love doing the work that protects everyone else, which is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Some aren't, right? So I think what you're counseling is for people to, I think the word you said, tune into what's real inside, mm-hmm. and really figure out what's real.
Yes.
I really appreciate this book. It affected me deeply, I have to say. It was very sad. The first part was very sad.
Yes.
For the fatherless boys, for boys in general who are taught to hurt themselves, that you win by losing. It was an amazing phrase. Obviously, I recommend everyone here get it. If you're a father, especially get it. If there's a woman in your life who doesn't understand that you have inner difficulties, you might want to get her that too.
Yes. Yes.
Any parting words of wisdom?
Yes, I just say in relation to what you were just saying now, that when either sex, if you're introducing the boy crisis to a woman, the framework that I think really is helpful is to know that there's with gender, with males and females, when only one sex wins, both sexes lose. Yeah. Our daughters want sons, young males who are worthy of their love. This is not a hierarchical, male-female relations is not hierarchical, despite what feminists say. We're all in the same family boat. We all either win together or we lose together. Our parents made sacrifices based on the need to survive. Our mothers made sacrifices of careers. Men made sacrifices in careers. And so we both had different types of sacrifices, but our goals were the same. Our goals were the sacrifices of mothers and fathers were made so that the next generation would have fewer sacrifices to make and more options. Let's not take that enormous gift that our parents and grandparents have given us and turn it into a gender war in which women are good and men are bad. Let's understand that when only one sex wins, both sexes lose. We have to both win together.
Beautiful words. Thank you, Dr. Farrell. Everybody, the book is called The Boy Crisis. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. You really did a wonderful job with the interview, just asking great questions. You went beyond where any other interviewer has gone in terms of bringing up the Maslow hierarchy of values and just and taking in many dimensions of it that other people have just missed. So
I feel like my heroic intelligence is vindicated.
Yes, or definitely your health intelligence. Right?
Thank you so much, and good luck with the book. I hope to see it on the bestseller list for a long time.
Thank you very much. How will you